fuck it. I mean, typically what you see, what I see, things start to get hard. Then they'll go on drugs and boom. Instead of trying to figure out how to overcome that sticking point, they just go on the PEDs and they overcome it with that. And then it takes them to another level, which can be the more you can keep your training program for said individual or yourself under constraints that allow for you to progress, the more variables and metrics you're going to be able to track to know if you're moving forward or backward. Not telling you to do the same training session 52 times in a row, for a year, but certain template should be followed that kind of allows you to be able to see that when 50% of your work is done in a 50 to 60% intensity zone and 20% is done in, a 60 to 70% intensity zone, and 10% is done in the 80% intensity zone, and 5% and so forth. When you can start to figure those things out, which takes time, right? This is where experience comes in. As it's always been said, training is a science, and it's an art, but you have to be able to have metrics that you can kind of put in place to be able to see, what's going on. So when progress halts, which it will, if you're in this for a long enough period of time, it will. And this is why a lot of lifters don't last long, because a natural progression is typically typically what you see, what I see, is somebody's new to the sport, they come into the sport and they're making the newbie gains no matter what they do. All right, and they're getting strong and they're doing well. And this may, depending upon genetics, it may take them a year, it may take them 2 years, 3 years, whatever it's going to be. Then boom, things start to slow down, things start to get hard. Then they'll go on drugs and boom. Instead of trying to figure out how to overcome that sticking point, they just go on the PEDs and they overcome it with that. And then it takes them to another level, which can be that going from a class 1 to a pro, or going from an elite to all-time world records. And then 2-3 years of that, boom, stuck. And they still haven't learned how to overcome a fucking sticking point. They have no idea what to do. So they go a year and they think, fuck, I must be done, and then retire. Or they keep pounding their head against the same wall, trying to get the same results out of doing the same thing over and over again, and then they get hurt. Because they don't have the drugs to rely on anymore. I guess they can go in gear. Gear would take them to another level. So that was kind of the progression before. It would be raw, then gear, then drugs. But regardless of the fact, they're going to get to a point to where it may take 2 years, it may take 3 years just to get a 5-pound PR total. And then something happens, and then the meet after that, they have a 100-pound PR in their total, or a 50-pound PR in their total at the highest levels. And then they attribute it to whatever new drug it was, or whatever new exercise they were doing over the past 3 or 4 months. And it's not attributed to any of that. It's attributed to the 3 years of trying all the other shit that didn't work to be able to find the thing that did work. So I'm a big proponent of learn that process as soon as you possibly can, because you're not as strong. There's less wear and tear. There's less beat down on the body. So if you learn that in the intermediate phases of training, and then when you get to the higher levels of training to where you're actually pushing your upper limits, and actually starting to become what you want to become, Then when you start to run into that wall, you understand, you know what's going on. So now instead of freaking out, stressing out, quitting, and all the other things that come along with it, that all produce more cortisol, which in hindsight, it just makes it even harder to recover, because all you're doing is freaking out about the fact that you can't make any progress, which is just this vicious circle, which just ends up with people leaving the sport. So when they learn how to overcome that, then they run into that. It's like, okay, I've been here before. I've been here before a couple times. Maybe let's back this down. You know, try this. Let's pivot here. Let's see what happens. You know, let's try this, which I totally disagree with, and you know, don't think is always said was never going to work. But fuck it, let's try it now, because what do I got to lose? You know, and then see what happens, and then kind of pop from there. So I don't know how I got to that from accessory work, but I fucking did.